The tape recordings you are about to hear were recorded in undisclosed locations more than 20 years ago. They were made on an old microcassette recorder and have never been played publicly before. Some of the things that are said may be both difficult to understand due to the quality of the tapes and troubling to hear due to content. Listener discretion is advised. When Dave gets in with Mickey McKevitt's Real IRA, he's in the top tier of militant Irish Republicans still fighting against the Good Friday Agreement. This is probably the most dangerous position Dave has found himself in. He's going to Army Council meetings where militant action is planned. He's going to engineering meetings where new explosives are brainstormed. Dave, the man who confronted his fear of flying by taking pilot lessons, maintains he was rarely worried. But he does recall one time in particular that scared him.
One time, I remember I got pretty scared. So I met with the first engineer guy, and he wanted to use, with some encryption, he wanted to use PGP. PGP is the encryption software that they wanted to use. It's short for pretty good privacy.
Dave is the supplier, mostly money. But Mickey's team also asked for things that are easy to get in the U.S.
They would give me a shopping list. I mean, absolute shopping list of stuff. As a matter of fact, the first time we came up with it, we're going down all this stuff, and I said, do you mind if I write this down? Because I can remember now, because it was fucking listens that way. No, okay, fine, write it down. Just be careful where you put it. Don't worry, I will be. A lot of times, recording that, so we're out of stuff. Like Mickey always told me, so we'll ask for 100 things, if we'll get one, we feel we're lucky.
So this particular shopping list had included the PGP encryption, and Dave delivered.
I think they were supposed to be used for clandestine communication. They were going to use them with a mobile phone to send warnings and stuff. That was the idea behind the warnings, or to release press statements, or so on and so forth.
But just because these things are easily accessible in the U.S. doesn't mean they're easy to get into Ireland, particularly when the local police forces don't know you're working for the FBI and MI5.
At one point in time, it was illegal to export anything over 40-bit encryption out of the U.S. And this was 2800-bit encryption. And I don't know why it was approved.
The FBI and MI5 have to approve anything Dave purchases to take over. They would review the so-called shopping list and determine what, if anything, Dave could actually procure for the group.
But I do know that they said that was fine. It was told me that was fine, give that to them.
So he shows up at the next meeting with the software as requested.
So this first engineer, this is what he wants to use, so I get programs and take them over to him. So there's a different guy there the next time. And he comes right down on me about this stuff. Oh, we want to use this stuff with emails, and that's not the way you do it. Use some other form of encryption that he came up with where you set and do the thing yourself on paper. And I'm getting nervous because this guy's real tough on me.
One engineer asked for the PGP, but a different engineer at the next meeting berates Dave for bringing this software into the group. Even if he's not showing it, Dave is sweating bullets. His handlers approve the encryption, but now he's facing an IRA engineer who's furious that Dave has brought it.
So finally I said, hey, listen, it wasn't my idea, it was the other guy's idea. You talk to him about it.
Dave thinks they're onto him, and he admits this was one of those times that he worried about his safety.
Mickey said to me afterwards, and goes, fuck him, I tell him, he'd tell him to go fuck himself, he'd have to do like that. Okay.
This is when Dave knew he had Mickey's confidence. The two got along, but Mickey's just told Dave not to take shit from the engineers. If they talk to him like that, he's got the boss's permission to tell them to go fuck themselves.
And I say this over and over, is that if they were all as sharp as Mickey, they'd have a problem. And it's just too bad that Mickey and Bernadette could go down different roads with this besides trying to blow people up.
Dave told us many times he liked Mickey. If circumstances had been different, they might have been great friends. We asked Dave if he found spy work as glamorous as the James Bond movies made it out to be.
It's a very, very boring job. I mean, it has a highlight, and obviously, the more it gets wound up, the faster it goes. You might get more information, but the thing gets heated up, and you wind up in patent quicker. It all has an end, and hopefully the end is going to be there. It's not your end.
I'm Abden Palish,
I'm Bob Hergeth.
in partnership with Entropy Media.
This is Underbelly, the rebel kind.
I was very nervous, but if you were nervous, then you make everybody else nervous. Everybody else pocket. He was a very bad guy. He was an ex-French Foreign Legion Special Forces, so I had a healthy respect for, his ability.
Yeah, I'm going to use the money to buy weapons. We have an army in the field. And I was like looking at him. I didn't think he was FBI because I thought he was even too crazy to be an FBI informant.
One thing we remember about Dave was his demeanor. He was always calm, cool, and relaxed. And he says that's how he was during his time undercover. He said specifically that he felt apprehensive at times. And with a few exceptions we've talked about before, he really never said he felt like he was truly in danger. Partly, he said, because he was a convincing character. Dave's life? He couldn't make it up. When we started this podcast, we didn't know where to begin. New York? Ireland? Florida? Chicago? Dave's stories, his life, his careers, they start in so many places, but it all leads here to Mickey McKevitt's Real IRA. And that's a story that has its own beginnings.
Mickey had charisma, but he knew how to cut deals and get things done.
Dave told us stories that Mickey related to him about various arms deals.
Mickey was personally in charge of I think they got 4 boatloads of weapons, like 86 from Gaddafi, and they got delivered to Ireland.
We're told McKevitt personally met Gaddafi and traveled to Libya more than once. And some of those weapons the IRA got, we're told they didn't work so well. I suppose like any good IRA foot soldier, there's not a lot of public information out there about McKevitt. A Washington Post article said McKevitt was shot in both legs by the IRA in 1975 for breaking rules. An article in the Mirror said McKevitt taunted his assailants before the attack, saying you'd have to get up pretty early to catch him. His shooter reportedly asked him, "Was that early enough for you?" McKevitt never ratted anybody out to police, which the Post reported earned him a reputation as a trustworthy soldier. He later married into Irish Republican royalty. Dave told us Mickey met Bernadette Sands while working with her at a factory in Dundalk.
She's kind of a hot potato there because her brother's kind of like an Irish folk hero,
As we've mentioned before, Bernadette Sands is a sister of IRA hunger striker Bobby Sands, whose death reinvigorated American interest in the Republican cause. I remember reading about it in the paper as a kid with rapt attention.
Bernadette was, as much involved in the IRA when Bobby Sands got arrested as Bobby was. And Bobby got caught.
Dave pretended to be a true believer for years, but has a very different view of Bobby Sands.
I would look at Bobby Sands and Ted Hunger strikers as suicides. Okay? If you said they were suicides now, you'd be lucky if you made it out alive.
20 years after Bobby's death, Dave describes a family, Mickey and Bernadette, who are desperate to continue the fight that Bobby died for.
Bernadette was a good speaker, and they had the right credentials, and coming from where they came from. And, I'm not saying they're going to go out and be prime minister tomorrow, but they most certainly were and are smart enough to carry on a struggle without being an armed struggle. And Bernadette was a 100% true believer in what she was doing. Well, the sad part about it is they were both very intelligent and very good at what they were doing. And if they had have taken the arms out of the struggle, they would have done very well with the struggle. But that's all Mickey knows, so what do you do?
Dave says it was personal for both Bernadette and Mickey.
I think he had two previous wives, and one was killed in a car accident just outside Dundalk on Belfast Road, the child. Because I think one of the newspapers pointed to that fact after Omagh, saying that this had made him crazy and this made him do Omagh, like that type of relationship.
In the midst of the peace process of the late 90s, Mickey broke away from the Provisional IRA to form what became known as the Real IRA. Bernadette formed the 32-county sovereignty movement, regarded as the group's political arm. Dave said Mickey had his sights set on getting back in with foreign groups to help aid his fight.
So he said, we're looking for state sponsorship. And there was a conference coming up that summer in Switzerland. He sent some people to try to make some contacts there, and they never did, with some of the Palestinians or the Chechens. So there was a conference coming up later that year, and this would have been in 2000, in Tbilisi, Georgia, and it was kind of like a terrorist conference. They were going to send some people there.
That article we referenced from the Post was titled "Get Out of Our Town," about the unpopularity of McKevitt and his family in the wake of the Omagh bombing. That town is Dundalk. It's a town between Dublin and Belfast, set against a bay on the Republic side of the border. Long known as a Republican town, it was even called an IRA town. Some police forces referred to it as El Paso, which is ironic because Mickey once gave Dave a mission back here in El Paso, Texas.
After Omagh, Mickey McKevitt and his family were ostracized in Dundalk, where they lived. Both the British and Irish governments were hell-bent on hanging the Omagh bombing on his shoulders. Dave hyped himself up as a career criminal turned international smuggler. So Mickey sent him on a mission to El Paso, Texas, where Dave might have an easier time smuggling weapons out of the U.S. into Mexico for passage to Ireland.
We were trying to set up an operation. They were tasking stuff down the border, so I went down and took videos of the El Paso border and everything for McKevitt. And we were looking at running arms. It was easy to get them into Mexico.
I visited El Paso this past year to retrace Dave's steps and interviewed a few folks familiar with the crossing there.
My name is Lauren Villagran. I'm the border reporter at the El Paso Times. Where we are right now in El Paso is originally the Paso del Norte. It is the pass of the north. So it's been a place of human migration for literally hundreds of years. We're on the Camino Real between Mexico City and Santa Fe. And this is a place where people have historically crossed between geographies and now between nations, between Mexico and the U.S.
In 2000, Dave flies down to El Paso, puts a camera around his neck, and walks across the border into Mexico.
I was just amazed how porous you walk into Mexico, and I was still waiting for somebody for a Mexican customs agent and we were probably there. We were probably out. Just walk right in.
Dave said he could have had a backpack full of explosives and no one would have stopped him. So that answered question number one. Yes, the Real IRA could very easily smuggle weapons from the U.S. to Mexico across the Texas border. Question number two. Could Dave get Mickey across the border into the U.S.?
My name is Vic Monjones Jr. I am the director for the Center for Law and Human Behavior at the University of Texas, El Paso, but I retired from the U.S. Border Patrol back in 2011.
Working the border. Did you ever have wanted or known terrorists or people that are on the list to watch for from like Europe or Asia, or people that weren't coming from Mexico or South or Central America coming through these borders?
So in my career in this position, I would say close to a dozen times that we had people hit on a watch list. There were folks what we refer to as special interest aliens, close to a dozen or so in my career.
Do you ever remember any Irish guys getting caught? No.
No.
There hasn't been a flood of IRA leaders into the U.S. from Mexico, But Victor Manjarres says the number of special interest aliens coming from other parts of the world to cross the southern border into the United States is way up in recent years.
I think the number was either 50 or 51.
Okay.
They hit a watch list that were not economic migrants. They were not asylees. These people were bona fide on a watch list. The State Department was concerned that they're bad people.
Okay.
You look at 50 out of 2.2 million arrests. But I always remind people, it took 19 hijackers.
So 12 in your career, but then 51 last year.
Last fiscal year, yes.
Last fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
What a big jump, right?
Yeah.
And that's what surprised me when I saw CBP release that number. I go, Jesus, that number jumped.
Yeah.
On that, and that's what was like so eye-catching for me, right? Is the flow greater, or did they get better at detecting that, or is it a combination of both? I don't know what that answer is, but the number was startling, right? On that, because you just normally don't see that number.
When Dave was scouting this border in 2000, it looked pretty easy to him.
They were on the U.S. side checking coming back, but there was also a line of probably 200 Mexicans on it.
Yeah.
So if you looked white and spoke without an accent, it was just like you'd walk through.
Dave said the U.S. Border Patrol just waved him through. Now that was before 9/11, but just this past summer, my son and I had a pretty easy time going both directions.
You saw that there were 2 officers at the top of the bridge.
Yeah, I didn't see them. I saw them kind of just waving folks through.
Right.
And
you were 2 white men.
We're white guys, yeah.
Yeah. So you're getting waved through, but other people are not. There's, obviously racial profiling.
Now this border crossing saga wouldn't be complete without Dave's own Forrest Gump moment. Dave is staying at a famous hotel in El Paso, and he gets back to the lobby to find a security detail there. He thinks it might be government guys sent to keep an eye on him, being a big-time international spy. As it turns out, future First Lady Laura Bush is staying at the same hotel after a Republican primary campaign stop for her husband, George W. Bush, who has just wrapped up the Republican nomination for president. The security wasn't for him. Now, as Dave walks back and forth across the border, he is taking phone calls from a guy he knows as James Smith. Smith was supposedly a former member of the French Foreign Legion. Dave says McKevitt touted Smith as a skilled assassin. Hypothetically, he'd be the one to take out then British Prime Minister Tony Blair if they wanted.
He was a very bad guy. He was an ex-French Foreign Legion Special Forces. And Marion Kevitt put me in contact with him. And to be actually in charge of him in weapons procurement. And Kevitt said that they would bring him home like they were going to assassinate Tony Blair or something. So I had a healthy respect for, his ability.
Dave had visited Smith in Boston and brought him a new assignment from McKevitt. Smith was to move down to El Paso and man the border.
Kevitt wanted him to move down to the border, down to the Mexican border. Because I went down there and we were trying to set up an operation.
But on these phone calls as Dave is crossing the border, Smith tells Dave there is a problem with that plan. He has fallen in love and doesn't want to leave Boston.
He had a girlfriend in Boston. He would have been very happy if the whole world would have just went, the whole IRA deal would have just went away. He was real comfortable.
How is Dave supposed to explain to Mickey, the guy he calls his top assassin, is refusing an order to relocate because he's in love? This is just one of the headaches of managing McKevitt's operations Dave is about to confront.
As we established in the last episode, Dave was the money man. The fundraising done by the Friends of Irish Freedom back in Chicago had bought Dave's way into the Real IRA. Frequently referred to in Ireland as the Big Yank, Dave becomes a sort of representative of Americans supporting the cause from afar. Dave was even quoted in the Irish Times saying there was support in the U.S. for anti-peace agreement Republican prisoners. His profile is growing, and one of Mickey's assignments to Dave is to recruit more American support groups to donate to the Real IRA. A New Yorker named John McDonough, who hosts an Irish Republican radio show, says he remembers Dave making the pitch.
When he came to New York, he met with me a couple of places, and he was telling me, yeah, I'm going to use the money to buy weapons. We have an army in the field. And I was like looking at him. I didn't think he was FBI because I thought he was even too crazy to be an FBI informant by just the way he was talking openly about that, because that was never done. I've been in the Republican movement most of my adult life. No one ever talked like he did.
Dave is orchestrating elections in U.S. support groups in New York and Boston to make sure his people are directing the money through him to McKevitt's new group. Dave helpfully volunteers to tape record every meeting. He doesn't mention he'll drop a copy of that tape to the FBI. McDonough said he told Dave he is not splitting from Republican Sinn Féin to join McKevitt's new group.
I'm just thinking this is a split. And I've been involved with the movement long enough to know there's always a ton of splits. There's always a new organization that's coming up. Oh, you're not hardcore enough. You're not left-wing enough. You don't kill enough. You don't do this enough. There's always somebody or some group that's going to do more than what you're doing, because whatever organization you're with, it's never doing enough. And I've seen it all before. And this was David Rupert. Oh, Republicans, they're not doing enough. They're not doing this. They're not doing that.
John McDonough says he should have known something was up with Dave.
You look back at it in hindsight, the red flags were there. When he kept saying to us, I have special software where we should be encrypting our email to send between all the members. And I kept going, why do we have to encrypt what are you saying in the email that we don't want other people to know?
If you remember, part of Dave's cover was being a computer guy. Dave took a few classes. He knew how to make a website, which was a lot more work back then than it is now. And before long, the IRA fancied him a bit of a computer expert. In fact, Dave gave the FBI a couple of pointers on encryption that helped him better communicate with his handlers safely over email. As for his IRA pals, he also brought them computers and encryption. But first, he had to clear it with British intelligence.
I would take over a computer and give to him. And, we'd meet somewhere on the way over, in Europe somewhere. They would have one of their computer people, and he would take the computer in the other room and have it during the day, and give it back to me before I get ready to go.
We don't know what they did with the computers. MI5 declined to speak with us about this case. But Dave, being the computer guy, earned him even more trust with McKevitt.
I was left alone in their house all one day, working on the computers.
Dave, the big Yank, was such a trusted member of the movement he was left alone at Mickey and Bernadette's house for an afternoon to set up a computer.
Most of my part in the Army Council meeting was just an attempt to impress me, where it's to give little stuff to take back for the U.S., here's what we're using the money for, so mostly it was just a PR, that type of thing.
Dave recalled for us his first time joining one of the Army Council meetings.
The first meeting I went to, Mickey and Stephen picked me up at his house because I think I've been there working on computers or something. I was very nervous, but if you were nervous, then you make everybody else nervous. Everybody ate pocket.
With a fuck it attitude, Dave is picked up by Mickey's son and driven to a handoff point to try and lose any police tails they might have.
And we went up, I can't think of the name, it was one of the little seaside places, like 10 houses on a beach, and he brought me up here, and it was, it's dark. There's a pickup truck sitting on the beach with no lights on. I get up there, I get out of Stephen's car and get in the pickup truck. And up we go.
Dave is logging in his head exactly how to get to these houses so he can report back to his handlers where he was.
And I would count, I would know where we turned, but when we got on the main road, I would count, like 1001, 1002, until we got where we turned again, so I could find his house again,
Dave has a good memory, and he made use of it.
Army council meeting, and we just sat around. I told them what I thought I could do for them. I was trying to pull all the support from who was supporting Republican Sinn Féin over to them, and I had been out on some details for Liffey trying to bring Republican Sinn Féin together.
The last thing Dave did at the Army Council meetings was formally present the money he raised in Chicago to McKevitt.
I would have taken over money, and I'd give it to Mickey, so at the meeting, Mickey give it back to give, to officially present to I'd give it to Mickey just because I don't want to carry it around.
Dave didn't want to be on the hook for all that cash if he lost it, but Mickey wanted to make sure Dave was seen handing it over. Dave says the Army Council meetings were serious in tone. They weren't drinking, they weren't joking around, they were focused on their mission. The homeowners weren't allowed to be there, and they even took preventive measures in case they were bugged.
It's really kind of funny when you mention that, because there would have been a big deal on, keep something playing so they can't, if they're bugging you, they can't hear it. But then the first thing is we turn that thing down like we can't hear you.
But he says the engineering meetings were different.
What we would do our narrative set and brainstorm. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you think this would work? Did you try that?
These are the meetings where the shopping lists were drafted. Dave would meet with the guys who were in charge of building bombs and strategizing new ways to carry out their planned attacks.
We're talking about police radars, because they wanted to use police radar on one and a radar detector on the other one, and use the radar detector to switch the fire. I said, I've had those radar detectors before. Fuck, don't go ask for the towers around here, all the microwaves around here. Well, yeah, we really should use wave detectors or laser guns, but they're they're a lot more expensive, and we'd like to see if these work. And he says, that's what buying trains are for.
Dave was astounded at the apparent lack of regard for human life. Over and over, he said Mickey's guys would shrug off the potential of casualties from sloppy bomb making, saying, well, that's what volunteers are for. Take this other idea.
One of the big things they're looking for, say for instance, was parking timers. Those little mechanical timers that went on your keychain. You would turn the timer for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever, and it would tick away, and so you know that your meter run out or wherever you were. And they would use these for bomb timers. And the bomb guy was telling me about, they had this switch that they made. They had this wooden peg. So the trick, you had to pull this wooden peg out. So that, part of the orders where you had to bring this wooden peg back, so they knew you actually did trip it. Or so if it didn't go off, it wasn't your fault.
At this point, Dave is visiting Ireland 3 or 4 times a year, spending as much time as possible with McKevitt. He goes to Army Council meetings to present the money raised in the U.S. He goes to engineering meetings to learn what the group needs. And through it all, he's observed a bit of callousness toward human life. So he's careful to keep his cover intact. But there were a few times he worried about just how tightly the security services were covering him.
The engineering meetings, more so than the Army Council meetings, gave Dave a rare insight into the psyche of an extremist group. He knew just how dangerous they could be, and what was at stake if he got caught. He liked to think the security services kept an eye on him, but he said, realistically, that probably wasn't the case.
I knew that from the time I left to go to the meetings until I got back, if they didn't have a clue where I was. If you were asked to call the minute you get out, then there's a pretty good chance they don't know exactly where you've been at.
Dave said the towns he frequented were so small that any unknown car would stand out immediately. So he wasn't being tailed by the Brits, and he probably didn't want to be. Dave always said the Garda was so filled with IRA sympathizers that he wouldn't trust the rank and file. His most desperate recourse if something were to go awry was that he could run into an RUC station or a Garda office and refuse to leave until the FBI was contacted.
I just, I spend all that time there. I just ride around and basically find ways to escape. Shit went wrong. Makes sense.
As much as Dave Rupert the Spy seems like a fly-by-night operation, the more we sat and listened to him talk, the more confident and composed he appeared. He had answers, he had plans, he had contingency plans, and he knew the territory. Just like he spent time with Joe O'Neill driving around looking for smuggling routes, he walked with Mickey around Dundalk. Sometimes they just had friendly chats about getting Dave a place to live in the area. They scouted places to buy property in case Dave wanted to try running a B&B this time. He then told us a story about Carlingford Lough, which I can't believe didn't give him away. Carlingford Lough is a sea inlet about 20 minutes northeast of Dundalk, right on the border.
There's a British ship that went in the middle of Carlingford Lough. For years, I guess we got there. It's a small destroyer, a very small destroyer. This was after the event in the U.S. boat, where the Cole? Yeah, the Cole.
In October 2000, 2 suicide bombers drove a small boat up next to the USS Cole battleship off the coast of Yemen and detonated explosives. The attack ripped a 40-foot hole in the ship's hull and killed 17 U.S. sailors. Dave says it gave Mickey an idea for that British ship sitting in Carlingford Lough.
So Mickey's right after this, he takes me up here to show me the ship, before I realized, unfortunately, we don't have a street by bomber, but yeah. Anyway, the ship's out there. So, he's gone on, well, we talked about the possibility of how to do the ship, and do it like remote control. I report this, and a week or so later, I'm out there, and the ship's way the fuck out. Yeah. Okay, so I brought it at the time. Oh, no, that wouldn't have anything to do with that. They must have just moved it. If it had been there for a year, parked it.
A week after Dave reports to the Brits that Mickey is looking at bombing the ship that's been parked in Carlingford Lough for years, he says it suddenly moved way offshore. Coincidence? Who knows? Dave says he was told it was unrelated. After years of infiltrating the IRA, Dave is faced with one of the toughest decisions he's ever had to make. Will he testify in court against Mickey McKevitt? It was never part of the plan. Dave told us his contract was simply for intelligence gathering. But will he put himself and his family in even more danger? That's next time on Underbelly, The Rebel Kind.
The Rebel Kind is created and hosted by Bob Hergeth and Abden Palish. Executive producer, Anjay Nagpal. Written by Dalton Main, Abden Palish, and Bob Hergeth. Senior producer, Dalton Main.
Editing and sound design by Gerard Bauer. Original music by Dale Eisinger. Show art by Rebecca Hendon.
Our show was recorded in the podcast studio at Roosevelt University. Our development producers were Danielle Elliott and Jen Swan.
Marketing support from Tessa Cairns-Clay. Production legal by Bruns, Brennan, and Barry. Legal clearance fair use by Rachel Strom at Davis Wright Tremaine.
From Entropy Media, the Underbelly series was created by Anjay Nagpal. Executive producer, Josh Fielstad. Executive producer, Gerard Bauer. Head of operations is Nuna Ebo. Project manager is Sebastian Perry. Associate producer, Heidi Rudvoets. Development and production support, Simona Kessler.
Special thanks to Flynn McRoberts for calling us in 20 years ago. This series is dedicated to the innocent victims of Northern Ireland's decades of violence.